Well, thank you for being here in a weekday in the morning. I will talk about the resistance against algorithm monopolies, which can be a kind of a strange title, so thank you for the trust. I have a certain kind of strong accent, so but don't worry. That's it. My name is Claudio Agosti. What can describe myself is I'm a computer activist that want to fight for the digital rights or the human rights in the digital sphere. I work with the NGO or with academy. Algorithm, that is one of the topic and one of the words I will repeat more often today, is quite a generic word. If you study computer science, you may have saw those kind of historical books from Knut. And algorithm means basically everything that transforms an input in an output, let's say. What we are talking more about today is personalization algorithm. Algorithm that personalize your perception because you are interacting with a platform, such as you search on Google search engine, you access to Facebook, you listen on Spotify, your suggested videos, your suggested tunes. Artificial intelligence is often mixed with this topic because, AI is a method to learn from people, learn what they like, and try to assume what they want next. That's why artificial intelligence and algorithm, personalization algorithm, often are said together. It's curious what is happening. At the beginning of 2016, happened that Google and Facebook released a couple of products, TensorFlow and Caffe, now renamed PyTorch. And both of them are tools through a new method of artificial intelligence called deep learning. And the deep learning is a framework. You can make it open source because the value is on the data that are necessary to train your computer. And after this computer learn from the past, will use this knowledge for further decision. That's also a nice approach from them because that's just try to reinforce the idea that if you have a lot of data, you have more value, more power, and more potential way to use it. And that's why data is described as the most valuable resource in the world. But we know that data are ours. Also, as European, we are protected by the GDPR. GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation, a law that has been in vigor since last year. And the GDPR defines you own your data. Your data are yours. You can always have a control of your data because the data are part of you. But the point is that we don't know exactly what are our data, which part of our data are used by this company. But that is important to understand because if we understand what is used, we can also understand how it can be used against us or not in our interest. We don't know what personal data means because personal data is not something so simple to be described. There are 4 kinds of personal data, and the first one is what we give. So if you register yourself on a platform, such this is my LinkedIn, you give something of you. You say your name, and who are your friends, which are your skills. What you declare is something that is useful for you to be found, for example, but often you can lie. For example, I have a multiple Facebook account, and nobody of them has my name, because what I give is on my control. What is observed? So the platform gives to you the service, you interact with them, and they keep track of what you're doing. That is more intimate because it describes already what you really care about. You may lie, you may say, for example, that you are underage women, but if you are reading content that are normally meant for old men, the system will understand that you are lying. What is attributed is something else. The platform is observing you and then start to decide something about you. For example, if I keep doing a search about computer programming and I publish an article on this topic, a system can automatically start to define that I am very likely a programmer. The fact that I speak 3 or 2 languages, that's define which language I know. And that is something that starts to define my level of knowledge or something about my background. If I speak foreign language in a country, for example, I lived for 5 years in Germany, but I was mostly speaking in English and Italian, and that was marking me as a migrant. Those kind of metadata describe me, but I never declare them. And then there is the inferred data. Because you are a migrant, because you are Italian, then you may be interested in pizza. That is an inferred data. It's something that is decided by the company, and I have no control on it. So the GDPR say, for example, you can have control of your data. When you want, you can take them back, you can change them, delete them. But the point is that we have awareness only on the first 2. And the other 2, instead, is something that we have to fight and to start to have a more connection between, collaboration between civil society, individual and citizen, and data protection authority. This legal framework is something that will stay with us for many years, and we should start to know it because that's define our relationship between states and companies. Personal data is one of the key of the protection against algorithm abuses. Because every form of customer discrimination passes through the fact that the company knows something about you. And the company wants to try to exploit it or leverage on it, can know this as your weakness, and try to sell products that are overpriced because you need it. And this kind of discrimination is what algorithms are meant for. If someone studies what is your past, is exactly because they want to invest to have you or to exclude you. Algorithms are used in different platforms, not just the one that make information circulate, such as Facebook, Twitter, but also on the platform economy, such as the riders, Deliveroo, Foodora, etc. And there are forms of unfairness that we still have to understand, because algorithms are invisible, they treat you differently from every other person, so it's a bit difficult to say and call out this is an abuse. That is at least one of the efforts I'm facing on talking about algorithms. And if you are good in communication, try to find out means to communicate how an invisible tool that selectively do cause some harm. And if you can communicate this, that can be an achievement. In the platform economy, there is some kind of discrimination or effects that you consider unfair. And in the platform economy, because afflict your work, you as a citizen can feel more concerned. But mostly on the presentation, we will talk about algorithms that interfere with the circulation of information. So platform economy means coordinate rider among the city and how people are eating and how new jobs are treated. Instead, information circulation platforms such as Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, that is more on how the information shape the public debate. That is what we look more. There are 2 false dichotomies that commonly are said. One is that if a better service will arise, then the people will go away from Facebook or Twitter. But that is not actually true, because there is a form of critical mass. So you stay on Facebook not because Facebook is cool or because it's very pretty with their blue and their picture, but because you have their friends. You have your friends there. This is the social graph, so every person has a connection, and you want to stay with this person. Sometimes you are forced by this kind of social dynamics to stay there. And that is also the reason why, if you don't like to be on Facebook, don't use it. Well, not everybody has this option. It's used to say that it's quite a privileged option to quit Facebook, because if you have already everything you need, you may not look for something new. But if you are a migrant, if you're looking for a new job, if you have to get a new connection because you change your city or because you are knowing a new company, you just need to have some space to do this kind of interaction. Now, I want to comment on events happening in the last month, because I mean, algorithm and AI, regulation, fairness, unfairness is quite a topic that is growing even more. But what I'm skeptic about is that very often the commentary that we heard about AI do not keep in consideration how this technology works. What I want to do as a computer expert that want to speak to people is to make this algorithm more visible, more accessible, and try to enable citizens to test their own algorithm. So Mozilla published 28 horror stories. Because it's difficult to talk about algorithm, because they are, at the end, mathematical rules, they start to use anecdotal reference, which is enough to create imaginary and to make you maybe see a story that is similar to something that is happened to you. So if you are interested, look on it. 28 stories on YouTube and how was recommending content. Then, Cathy O'Neill is an writer, and she wrote this book. But I want to comment on the headline. What if algorithm did the hiring at Fox News? This is an hypothetical story, but it's interesting because it shows how algorithms are seen as a solution, and you don't know why they are a problem. So in Fox News, which is a company in the US that produces content for television, there is a problem of sexism, allegedly. I never worked in Fox News, but Cathy was commenting on articles that were mentioning and calling out these issues. And the issue is about it's difficult to hire women in position of power. And that's because there is a toxic culture or whatever other reason. Then she was making an hypothesis. Once a while, you know that some techie appear like a ghost and say, you can solve this problem with AI. What if, in fact, an algorithm will try to replace the hiring process? Can it be more fair? That is a promise that often we tend to believe because it's a machine, it's not a human. A human has prejudice, and a machine has not. But how an algorithm works? Well, we'll, for example, look on the past 20 years of the company, who has been hired, and how long they stay in the company. If you reach a position of power, it means that the hiring was successfully. So imagine that a tool will look on 20 years history, learn something, and then try to apply this knowledge to the next hiring queue. What will gonna happen is that, in this case, you will hire even less women because the algorithm has learned that women are not performing well in the company. That is an example on how we believe that algorithm can make the things more fair because they are neutral, but they are not because they learn from a society that is not neutral. That's, I mean, it was an hypothetical story of a couple of years ago, but in this month has been released an analysis on how algorithm can be used in healthcare. Because the triage process, the triage is when you reach the emergency room and doctors and other practitioners evaluate your case and assess a grade of urgency. And somehow, using data from the US, was turning out that people of black skin or not Caucasian were a bit more mistreated, less believed on the symptom they were declaring, less believed on the danger and on the issue in the health, in the issue they were feeling. And again, imagine that the story of Cathy that I said before, the algorithm learn from a biased society, and what we want to apply is just to replicate this bias. But it's curious, this headline, because it says algorithm can be racist, but at least they can be fixed. Why they can be fixed? Well, because if you know that you have some underlay racism, you can try to ignore, for example, discriminatory factors such as the skin color. Why the algorithm should know that I am with a Chinese descendancy or with African descendancies? It's pointless. The symptoms in the body are the same. But it's not true all the time, especially because the women body and the man body are clearly different. This idea that the algorithm can be fixed is another step on how algorithms are getting embedded in public policy. If it's true that we can trim the algorithm to make it the society fair, means that we as a civil society should be capable to keep those algorithms accountable. If they are like public policy, they should be subject to public scrutiny. That is not exactly what is happening in India when the authentication method, the Aadhaar, that identify every Indian citizen and is used to pay taxes, pay fines, or get also support, such as subsidiary food. What turned out is that if you do not keep those tools accountable, they may not work properly. And this is a story that was published in The Guardian on a person that was relying on this method to get additional food because he was poor, but died because the algorithm the tool stopped to recognize him. That is another kind of tendency, believing that the algorithm will help someone to do assessment and decision. A face scanning algorithm that want to tell you who is the proper hire for you. So this is illegal in Europe. If you know that someone is using this technology, should be denounced because that means that you are getting discriminated or selected by the usage of your personal data, which is biometrics, and that is not okay if there is no consent. But it's sadly a tendency that we have to keep in account. Probably you saw, at least in my bubble in the last week, this video of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez questioning Mark Zuckerberg on a, about Facebook and political advertising was quite viral because it's always nice to see this lady making question to one of the most powerful men in Earth, and the man answering, I don't know, I don't remember, I'm not sure. But we have to take a step back to understand how we are here. In 2016, when the surprise of Donald Trump shake a bit also the Silicon Valley, and that kind of nerd heaven start to find some responsibility for what they were doing. In 2016, happened that there was the famous scandal of Cambridge Analytica, and not related or partially related, also the interference from the Russian troll, how they were calling it, that were spreading misinformation using advertising. Misinformation, disinformation are different terms, but just call it misinformation in this case. If you want to keep some seconds to read The Army of Jesus, I will drink. Anyway, this was showing some of the initial difficulties of regulation of this platform, because you want to avoid that someone spread a lie, but what is true and what is false is not a decision that a machine can do. And Facebook or Google, they work with the presumption that everything can be decided by a machine. If their business model cannot scale having machine, but should scale having more people, that will not be so successful. But now we take a step back 8 years before, when Barack Obama won the first election, because he was the first one, the genius, that used Facebook to do micro-targeting and have people get out and vote. And that was great, but the difference was in the intent. They were trying to do information and advocacy. Instead, if you're doing disinformation, spreading lies, or spreading things like Satan wins if Hillary Clinton wins, you may have a qualitative judgment that is a bit different from them. And still, researchers such as Zenith Tufekci wrote articles explaining how this method is corrupt, because you are basically selling the weakness of people through a platform, and you can start to target your focus group. And all this debate talk about advertising. Advertising is only between the 12 and the 18% of your timeline on Facebook. This is one of my timeline. I just shrink the post and color them to take a sort of step back and try to see how much advertising I have. In this case, in red, you see the advertising. If you are colorblind, are only 2. And all the remaining content is something that depends from my friends or the page I'm following. That is called organic content. And in the timeline also exists viral content, which is content of people that you are not following, but Facebook guess that is so cool that you cannot miss it. That is the point. The promise of Mark Zuckerberg in 2018 is became, I'm changing the goal I give our product teams from focusing on helping you find relevant content. But how can Mark or the algorithm knows what is relevant for me? I mean, not even I know what I want. But that is the message of the company. How it went? Well, let's say that the style of Facebook is not really changed despite the motto that did. For example, there was a research that has been published in a leaked document on how some analysis was meant to analyze a teenager, and if they were feeling depressed, they were more susceptible in clicking on content. And that has also been questioned in the Congress investigation inquiry, because that is an abuse. And Mark Zuckerberg justifies saying, no, but that was a research from one of our external consultants. No. If someone access to the data of the company, is acting on behalf of the company. Because you give the consent that the company will process your data, and cannot be acceptable an answer such as, no, it was not us. If you have access to the data, you are acting on behalf of the company. Or automatically, the system tries to understand what is your interest, and if you have some specific interest, someone may be interested on target you for advertising. But that also make emerge phenomena such as Jew haters. Or the issue is about how much this algorithm has an impact on the circulation of information. A lot. But the only way to understand it is stop to talking with the corporation and be scientist and do research independently, and this is what we made. This is our claim. A personalization algorithm can easily take the shape of an oppression tool, because it can decide what people will see, and you can fragment the society in classes. It imposes on you values. But again, values is an abstract term. I have something more concrete. Once, I was living in Rio de Janeiro for 6 months, and I was going to move on a new neighborhood, and in the week before, this news broke. It happened that this couple of tourists, they were traveling via motorbike, and they were following Google Maps. In Google Maps, you can decide 2 options. Values. If you want to pay toll or no. But sometimes some streets are populated by gangs that shoot everybody that do not belong to their gang. And that is exactly what happened in a certain dangerous area. That's why Brazilian people made Fogo Cruzado. So it's a map where you keep track on shootings, because the dynamics of shooting is that if the gang get discovered by the police, then they migrate in another slum, and you have some shooting of assessment for some weeks, and then it became more peaceful until the police intervene again, and that's move out. So you need, if you are moving around Rio de Janeiro, to know which are the dangerous spots. That is an example of a local value. So me, as a migrant, the first things the people say to me is, look at Fogo Cruzado when you are planning your route. But the two bike drivers were not aware, and Google was not caring of this. And just imagine if you can mix on your GPS or your Google map the input from another map, such as Fuoco Cruzado, and avoid the places that are dangerous. That is an example on a value that is only in the local sphere, that you need to have it respected on your tool. But if the tool is developed somewhere else, where people don't feel this problem, they will never care about this set of information. But at the end, it's a matter of empowering. If I give power to communities, they can decide what they want as value to be considered in the algorithm that calculates the route. YouTube seems more innocuous, but there was an interesting publication in the last month on how radicalization was happening through YouTube, because you start to watch a content and automatically the next video that gets display is something that is a bit more extreme. But I mean, a bit more extreme for me, again, is an anecdotal reference. I cannot accept that someone say, that thing is more extreme. Tell me what is it? Tell me why? Tell me what is the context? And the point is that if you want to analyze a personalization algorithm, you cannot do it with only your point of observation. If I look with my computer, I cannot understand how the algorithm works. I can believe, I can try to feel something, but I will never understand it because it's personalized. The only way is to do comparison with other people. In this case, is the result of, well, the laser is not working, but no problem. In this case, is a result of a search query. If you put two different search queries that I made with two browsers in the same time from the same computer, just they have a few differences in my past behavior, and you can see some difference. Some of the videos that were suggested on the left were not present on the right, and vice versa. So we start to compare those recommendations. Those are research queries. What we look at are the 20 recommended videos. How we made this test? We took 10 to 12 students. It happened in the University of Amsterdam in this summer, with a tool developed by us that will be used also tomorrow at the masterclass, the one about analyzing the YouTube algorithm. We did this test. All the students were accessing with a clean browser. A clean means a browser without cookies, a browser that for the platform looks like a new user that has never connected to YouTube, has no story, has no back information. All the 10 students were connecting in the same moment to watching the same video with their own clean browser. And then we record all the suggestions, all the recommended video. That is how it was looking. So you can see that in the black dot are the people. The green dots are videos suggested only to one person. For example, the profile 4 got this 6 videos suggested only to them, and the other 14 videos were in common with the others. The blue dots are the videos suggested to more than one individual. So you see that when you have very small personalization, you get this shape emerge. Why profile 4 and 3 have this cluster of green dots? Because we realized after that that browser was with a Korean char set, and the other one with a French char set. The only information that YouTube had in that moment about those persons is that they have a computer that is not in English, but with another language, and therefore was already applying some personalization. But we spot it after. Only in other tests, we start to also keep care on the char set in the computer, but it's something that we required a completely reinstallation of the system, so it's not something we really control. And then, what is the opposite of the clean browser? The dirty browser. We take the browser that you use every day to do your search query. Maybe you are logged in your Gmail or in your YouTube, and that's imply high personalization. And that is how it looks like. The kind of content in the middle are the one shared among all the students, but the majority of the suggestion is personalized. So the amount of green dots, as you see, is overwhelming the blue one. And that was for us a starting point. So if we know how is the situation when there is no personalization, if we know how it looks with personalization, then we can start to play with it. We can start to see what make YouTube personalize your experience. So let's play with variables, we call it. One of the tests has been done, such as the students watch a video for 20 seconds, then, the students were divided in two groups. The group in green watched a video for 20 seconds, and another group watched another video for 20 seconds, and then we look again at the same video to compare those 200 suggestions, 200 because 10 students multiply by 20 suggestions, 200. Then we did the same test, but using 2 minutes instead of 20 seconds. And already with a few seconds more at the end, you already see that YouTube starts to personalize a bit more. And that was our way to prove that every second you are watching a video will have an impact on what will be suggested later. But without doing this comparison, we could not have spot this kind of personalization. We did a test also on Facebook. We also published some academic paper or some analysis on the Italian election with an NGO. If you're interested, you will find the reference at the end. Again, the goal is analyzing what Facebook sends to people, not what people are doing with Facebook, but what Facebook selects for you. What was curious is that the majority of the content that appears in your timeline is a minority of the content potentially available. We were controlling 6 fake profiles under our control. This profile were accessing to Facebook automatically. For 13 times per day, they were accessing, scrolling, and we were capturing what Facebook was selecting for them. And we knew what they were following because they were clean profile, just made. They were following the same 30 page. They have some differences on what they were liking. This test was made in Argentina, and we also made another test in Italy or in Brazil. And this graph display, this is the size of all the posts potentially available for the profiles, because they were following some pages, and those pages were keep publishing content. But what appeared to them was only this small section in proportion, and that's start to display how much space, how much room Facebook has to show you a perception of the public debate that is different from someone else. And that is not something that was so new, because this was this infamous experiment in 2014, where Facebook took 1 million people, 333,000 as a control group. The other 333,000 used to be on the positive emotion, and the other in the negative emotion. How it works. Facebook knows all the content you have potentially available on your timeline. Facebook algorithm analyze the sentiment, attribute a sentiment in the post. So some posts were containing positive values, happiness, joy, and the other was containing only the negative one. And the experiment was, what if we display to these people only the negative and to the other only the positive? What's gonna change? Well, something was changing, but the issue is that true people that were trusting Facebook to connect them to friends were used as rat labs and played with their perception of the world at the end. If you use Facebook to be connected with information media or with friends, that is your perception of the public debate. So we start to do this analysis of the algorithm using the difference is a way to you do the difference between one profile and the other, and you start to see how they get differently treated. In this specific test, the one made with the Web Foundation, the invisible curation of content, we were simulating a 6 women profile. There was a certain problem of domestic violence in Argentina. And what was curious is that article talking about femicide, rape, homicide, despite they were present, they were not appearing for these profiles. We also did this test during the Italian election, and we start to find new metrics. Like, as long as I'm using metrics like those, we are talking about one word that is not appeared. It's not something that is very reusable. But we start to find new metrics, a new way to measure the algorithm. Because, okay, the algorithm can be bad, but what is a good algorithm? Nobody knows. Because there is not a shared knowledge or decision on what is a good algorithm. So we start to measure it just to see how differently people are treated. What is curious is that those people, those profiles, they were, again, false profile created by us, accessing to Facebook in the same moment of the day, scrolling automatically. And they have, we made Facebook believe that they have some kind of political tendencies, because they were liking content from the different political spectrum. And this was the only difference between them, but that was enough to, for example, change the percentage of picture, video, and text they were getting. So you have the name Santiago that was liking the center left, that get on the 8th of February, photo 39%, post, so things with the text, 57%, and video only the 3%. The same day, Michele, that was liking the far-right content, was getting the majority of picture, 53%, less content of textual, 38%, and a bit more videos. And it's curious because every day, the pattern was somehow repeating itself. It's like Facebook decided behind the scene that this kind of person want to have an information diet composed by 60% picture and 40% text. In the moment we get this visualization, we said, Eureka, is a pattern, is something that we can use to measure how Facebook is treating us. Another interesting way is how frequently a content gets repeated. Because we were accessing constantly. If you are exposed to new content every time, at the end of the day, you get more information. So this graph can be a bit hard. At the first line, observed one means that the size of the amount of content seen only once by the profile. If a post appears a second time, means that will be counted also in the second row. If appear 3 times, in the third, and so on. So you can see, for example, that Andrea of the right is the one with the most information diversity. Is the one that very likely what is seen once will not appear again, and has been exposed to much more information. Instead, Michele of the far right is the one with more repetition. And if you sum that this repetition was basically reducing the amount of information exposure of this person. And most of the content of Michele were picture, so you can understand that this may have some impact. And it's not that Facebook decide that the far-right people should be informed in that way. It's just an effect of automatic decision-making. This is an effect, visualization time is up already, up less 5 minutes. Sorry. Anyway, this is a research we made to try to see how the filter bubble can be visualized. And this is a Venn diagram, a comparison between how different profiles perceive a topic. That is something we're trying to implement to let people play with it. So if you use Facebook Tracking Exposed, our tool, you may have in the next weeks, because we still have to complete some something, you may have you may have an analysis of the topic. So from every kind of text you get extracted the debated topics, and these debated topics can be used to compare with your friend and get such kind of Venn diagram and understand how you and a friend of you are perceiving differently a story. At the end, we cannot wait that the machine will help us to know what is true and what is false. But if we can talk with our friends or people we trust, and we can compare how we are getting information on a topic, we can start to at least acknowledge that our perception is very subjective. So I have to run super fast. Accountable, fair, transparent, explainable. These are the 4 buzzwords used to say artificial intelligence should be in this way. Yes, but when Facebook promised to the European Commission that they will make their algorithm more explainable, they made a tool that basically was saying, you see a post because you liked some content of the same author in the past, which, yeah, is not an explanation. We also made Pornhub tracking exposed because algorithms are everywhere, and well, it's not yet released, but again, soon. We made some tests, for example, Pornhub in the same way of YouTube. Look if you are a user with a backstory, and so knows what are your preference. And we try to find 4 different cases to do the test using incognito, navigation, logged profile or not. Interesting is that you are getting suggestion of different porn category based on what you saw on the past. And why we want to make this analysis? Because at least in Italy we have a certain problem of sex education in school. And if we don't educate on sexuality, it's porn that educate on sexuality. Therefore, it's better to be aware on what is happening behind that scene. Okay, Facebook want to eat you, but the time is over. If you want to read an interesting book, those people, they were a Sweden researcher that analyzed Spotify. Spotify tries to sue them. That's why, I mean, it's a bit difficult to analyze companies. We have to do what is called passively scrape, keep evidence of what the company are sending to you, but because those data are controlled by the companies, they don't want that should be reused in the way you researcher want, and they do this kind of pressure. This is the website of the project I'm leading. It's an open source project, free software project. And we really want to increase the amount of contribution because of contributors, because we need to explain how these algorithms are impacting on society, on the perception of ourselves, and on the surrounding. And the only way is to grow as a group, as a more diverse, and improve our visualization. That's, I guess, is all. So thank you for listening.